So now we have a very special part of the evening, and that's our panel. First up is Esther Perel, recognized as the world's most original and insightful voices on couples and sexuality. She is fluent in 9 languages. That's amazing. Where are you, Esther? I can't believe that. She holds a diverse couples therapy practice in NYC and is a speaker sought out from the bedroom to the boardroom. Her recent TED Talk, which I personally loved, was amazing. Really amazing. Actually went viral with over 2 million views in just a few months. She has also received the Vicky Woodhull Sexual Freedom Award and is regularly featured in magazines like, well, basically every magazine and newspaper in the world, national and internationally. Next, we have our social. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. We also have our social and psychological sex therapist, Dr. Sarah, who has worked globally across over 15 countries, helping various organizations and causes as a consultant, keynote speaker, media commentator, and trainer around cultural and religious aspects around sexuality, love, marriage. And she's also an award-winning creator and host of a BBC show and co-author of Orgasm, the Answer Guide, which we gave away earlier. She's also a member of the executive committee of the World for Sexual Health Committee here in North America. And last but not least, we have Dr. Jane Greer. Let's give both of them a hand, all of these lovely ladies. She's a nationally renowned relationship expert, marriage and family therapist, author, blogger, and radio host. She's the creator of Shrink Wrap with Dr. Jane Greer, a media commentary on what we can learn from the trials and tribulations and the triumphs of celebrity relationships. And she is also an amazing author and has been in the Huffington Post, Psychology Today, and Metro. So let's give them all a round of applause. So ladies, I know everybody's been waiting to hear from you. And my first question I'm actually going to ask Dr. Sarah. I want to know, we know that you have a lot of politically correct views, but I also know that you have a lot of views that are not so politically correct that are very important for all of us to hear tonight. So I have a little bit of a question for you to kick us off. What are sexual rights? What does it mean to you personally?
Disclaimer, I'm not representing the World Association for Sexual Health here at this panel. I'm representing me as a sex therapist and educator and, well, consultant. Okay, so I first share a few dilemmas with you so that you know how I came up with this definition of sexual right for myself, so you don't think I'm just controversial for the sake of it or I'm crazy. One thing is, imagine I had a couple coming to me. The man has erectile dysfunction. I worked with them. The process was very successful. We were this close for him to get it up and running, wonderful. And the woman calls me and says, "Oh, Dr. Sarah, hi, how are you doing? We don't wish to continue the therapy." I said, "Okay, that's very nice. May I ask why?" And then she said, "Yeah, because I'm just afraid that my husband will get it up and running, and then not with me, but with other women."
He's going to be running.
Wow. Running. Exactly, exactly. So whose right are you defending here? Okay, so I didn't say anything. They didn't come, obviously. I couldn't make them come. So the next one, a Somalian mother came to me and said, "Dr. Sarah, would you please talk to my daughter because she is of that age that she needs to go through the process of genital cutting. As you know, in some cultures they do. So if she doesn't do it, that they cut certain parts of the genital area to make them acceptable for marriage and purify the woman. Different cultural beliefs. So would you talk her into it? Because if she doesn't do that, there's no prospect in the community for a good husband. The whole family will be isolated and all that." And then here's the teenager sitting in front of me saying, "I really do not want to do that." So I understand the mother and the concerns, I respect that, but then I couldn't possibly do that for the daughter. So whose right are you defending there? The other thing is, now getting to the politically very correct things that I say all the time. So overutilizing the sexual rights kills me. Because I see more and more people in my practice, women specifically, coming and saying that I have an orgasmic dysfunction. And then when we put them through the rigorous test, they're fine. They're absolutely fine. But because they are not dangling from chandeliers, they feel like, oh, I'm not normal, or, this is not orgasm, this is not how it should feel, right? So I figured that, when I ask them, so what do you expect? In Northern America and Western European countries, usually we have the idea that we have to enjoy sex. We have to have orgasm because this is my right.
Many.
Absolutely, multiple. Thank you for that. And we have to ejaculate, even these days for women. Why am I not ejaculating? So I'm done with that, really. So here's my conclusion of the whole thing. Here's my definition, or dimensions. I don't believe in using the terminology as sexual rights with my group of people. I always talk about sexual health and well-being. And the reason behind it is I could customize that to people. Health is health. Your heart is either beating or not. But right is quite relative. So that's my definition of it. Sexual right is relative. So that would be my long answer to your short question.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you. And I so appreciate hearing your perspective on that because you have just so much international experience. So it's very interesting that that's your perspective on it. Dr. Jane Greer, what do you have to say about this?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here. You are such an inspiration to all of us with the World Sexual Health Day. Thank you, Dr. Sara. Absolutely. For me, I wrote a book called What About Me? Stop Selfishness from Ruining Your Relationship. Now, interestingly enough, it did not start out with that title. My husband Mark and I were out to dinner with our dear colleague and friend and renowned celebrity psychic Maria Papapetros, who's here in the audience. If any of you want to know what's around the bend or around the corner.
After this.
In any event, we were sitting there at dinner, and very, very casually, Maria said to me, so what's the title of your book? And I tell her the title, and she goes, no. She says, the title should be What About Me? Now, What About Me actually was the title for my chapter 4 on selfish sex. So when she said, what about me? I said, no, because to me, what about me was tied into selfish sex. And then a few minutes later, she said, so what's the title of your book? And I said, the title. And she said, no, what about me? And again, I said, nah. 3 times she said, what about me? So I said, okay. And that Monday, I called my editor and I said, I was talking to my dear colleague and friend, world-renowned celebrity psychic, and she said the title of my book really should be, What About Me? And my editor said, Jane, it's funny you should say that because I was talking to the publisher and we decided the title of your book should be, What About Me? Well, now, okay, Maria was so much more profound in her psychic vision than she realized because What About Me speaks to the deprivation, the unhappiness, the emptiness, the resentment, the anger that people feel when their needs are not being met, when they feel they're being ignored, neglected, cheated out of what they long for or want. And it is nowhere more pronounced than when it comes to your sexual self and your sexual esteem, to feel that you cannot be authentic and real and honest about your desire, and to feel that your desirability is being ignored or completely lost because of your partner's selfishness, cuts to the core and to the heart and soul of your sexual and your self-esteem. And so, to me, your sexual right and what sexual rights are about is about being your own advocate, your own sexual advocate, being willing to be honest about what it is you want and don't want, being willing and able to say yes to yourself and no to a partner if necessary, to acknowledge your needs, to embrace your needs, and most importantly, to be open and direct and to communicate those needs to a partner, to your partner, clearly and directly, so that you can carve and create the kind of sexual intimacy and closeness that you long for, whether you want more affection, whether you want less oral activity, whether you want more frequency, whatever those needs are, to say yes to yourself, to say no, to be able to be true to yourself. That is what will give you your sexual esteem. That, to me, is exercising your sexual rights.
Isn't she amazing?
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So do you think it's really about communication? Is it a personal decision first and then having that to empower you to then communicate that with the person that you're with?
Yes, absolutely. You have to have the courage to look into yourself and really embrace what turns you on and what turns you off. And then to be able to surmount your fears, to not let your fear of criticism of your partner ridiculing you or dismissing your needs or laughing at you or thinking that you're being demanding or greedy or all the things that other people do to diminish us in the face of their needs being met. And just being true to yourself and staying on track and saying, this will make me happy. Because ultimately, I work with couples day in, day out, and the hardest thing in the world is to please your partner. And that's what we all want to do. We want to make the people that we love, the person that we love, we want to make them happy. And yet everybody gets caught up in their frustration and their disappointment. And very often it's so easy for people to talk about what they don't like and what turns them off and the blame and the negativity, rather than what they do like and what turns them on. So to be able to communicate clearly and to ask, what is it that I like and what can I do to please myself and to please you, and then to share that is really the bridge to intimacy. So.
Thank you. Thank you. So Esther, what is your take on sexual rights?
Well, I actually am just looking at this kaleidoscope here, and I'm thinking there's so many ways I can enter, but you're emphasizing health, and you're emphasizing sovereignty and autonomy. And so I think the next big block to sexual rights would be to talk about education. Without information, without education, people cannot have a sense of sovereignty, and certainly they cannot have access to health. This country spent $1.3 billion between 1996 and 2007 on abstinence-only campaigns. That's the extent of sexual education that Sarah was alluding to, but didn't dare to say out loud.
Not a citizen yet.
So, I actually have my swearing next week. This is the foreigner's take on American sexuality. So I could say a few other things about why the landscape of sexual rights in this country is very complex, because there is an emphasis at this point in two particular areas. One has to do with gender equality and gender orientation equality, and the other one has to do with the protection of children from sexual predators. That's basically where sexual rights are located in the US at this point. Where they're not located has to do with abortion, with contraception, with fertility management, with LGBT lifestyle, with women's sexuality, and particularly the fact that there is no public health policy on adolescent sexuality. Why? Because one of the fundamental ways that the US views sex is that it's a risk factor. It's not the negative consequences of irresponsible sexual behavior that is the risk factor. Sex is the risk factor. And once you put it like that, to begin to look at sexual rights as a fundamental human right becomes completely compromised. The second level of this is sex is dirty, therefore save it for the one you love. You know?
It's not very romantic.
So what we have at this point, as my colleague once said, is a kind of a sexual wisecracking that is constantly trying to actually cover up sexual shame. We have 3 major revolutions, right, and in terms of this subject that have gone on. We have longevity like we've never had, we have the sexual revolution, or the gender revolution more correctly, and we have the whole technology thing. What do we have as a result? An enormous amount of phones, internet, etc., a permissiveness for the commercialization of sex, a complete change in the perversity and the laws, and new regulations in the media. And we have a basic sexual glut, a kind of overflooding of sexuality on one side, all excessive, met with repressive tactics on the other side. Actually, I would probably say that the American landscape on sexual rights is where Puritanism and hedonism collides. You know, it's excessive practices on one side, repressive tactics on the other. You know, everything is a matter of national political agenda. There's no country where a man's dalliances can actually topple a government like it can do so here. You know, and we haven't seen the women's version of that yet, because she would be way too scared to actually dare to, you know, to even launch herself into politics if she had anything in her closet. Sorry for the closet metaphor yet again. You know, so. When I work with couples, I mean, actually, we very much, the 3 of us here, are women in the trenches who are seeing couples day in, day out, and individuals, men, women, heterosexual, same-sex couples, transgender couples, who are grappling with this concept of sexuality, which for the first time in our history is actually no longer just a property of biology, but has become an element of our identity. Courtesy of the gay movement. It has to do with who I am. Sex isn't just something we do, sex is a place we go. It's a space we enter. It's an expression of ourselves. Rather than asking how hard, how long, how many, and all the statistical evidence for sexual performance industry, if we actually ask people, what does sex mean to you? What do you experience there? What parts of you do you connect to and with another? We would develop a whole different kind of phenomenology around sex and around sexual rights. South Africa has sexual rights as part of its constitution. It actually really saw the distinction between sexual freedom and individual human rights. Why can't we follow in that same footstep where we begin to look at sex as a constitutional right? And once we look at it like that, sexual education will be something that we do year in, year out with kids, so like they learn spelling and mathematics, and not that thing that you have to take them out of the classroom to go study that subject. That is that risk factor for which we primarily learn about the dangers and the mishaps and rarely about the pleasures. Now, there is the big taboo. I think that's...
Wow, well said. Thank you.
We go political.
No, look, I went to high school in Texas, so so I definitely know what you were talking about.
I think the key word is to have a framework of rights is a framework that integrates sexuality into the fabric of people's life like a normal part of health, of education, of everything else. As long as it's pushed aside as this marginal, dirty thing for which you're looking for the right moment, it never comes.
As it is in most of the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very curious. You touched on a lot of amazing things that I think all of us here are going to think about tonight and the next few days. But what can we do? What do you think? Because everybody that's here, I think, is very interested in this subject of sexual health for all. What do you suggest is an action?
I think tonight is an amazing action to actually put sex in a political, social, cultural framework on a stage with people who integrate the arts, psychology, and politics, and to make sex become a subject of conversation that is normal, that is natural, and that doesn't just actually, you're all in the dark, but I was going to say shouldn't be spoken about just in the dark. That in itself is a major action, is to take this subject out of the guilt, the shame, and the silence, and to integrate it, like, you know, and then we begin to have a very different kind of conversation. So this, to me, is action, actually, as well as celebration, but it is action. It is sex that isn't either smut or sanctimony, which is what most of the time we get.
Absolutely. Dr. Sarah, what do you think? How can we start to act on being more available to how we feel and then communicating that to others? What do you think is the takeaway?
Esther said it beautifully in a bigger concept. I'm going to just narrow it down to maybe individual levels. What I see a lot causes people problem is that you don't know what you want. Please know what is your sexual freedom. What is that boundary? Communicate that with yourself first, then to the poor person who is in a relationship with you. Because most often, they don't know, they don't have a clue. And even in same-sex marriages or relationships, you know, they fall into this loop that, oh, you're a man too, or you're a woman too, you should know better. But no, they don't know. They're not you. They might be angels in your eyes, but they're not mind readers. Please make sure that you and the other person are in the same line, especially now that we're moving forward to change the constitution of marriage with open relationships and all that. Please make sure that you know what freedom means to you and whether it's acceptable to the other person. This is just my only wish for everyone tonight at the personal level.
Thank you. Jane, absolutely. Jane, what is one of your takeaways from all the things that were said tonight that you would like everybody to act on?
Well, I think taking action is to really be tuning into yourself, be aware, just like you were saying, of what it is that's most important to you, not assuming that the person that you're with knows, because that will get you nowhere. You have to let yourself be known. You have to be willing to take the risk to share. You have to be willing to be your own advocate. You have to be willing to acknowledge and step into your sexual self-esteem and to speak to it and to act upon it. And I think if you do that, and if you're willing to take the risk and trust that your partner ultimately wants to please you, and most importantly, if I could say one thing, when you talk about the things that you would like sexually in your relationship, talk about the things that you want positively, not the things you don't like. Speak to, I would like more of, I would like it slower, faster, more frequency, harder, whatever, rather than, I don't like it when you, I don't like the way this, because nothing will cut to the quick of somebody's self-esteem and sexual self-worth faster than a critical comment. And I cannot tell you, in the course of my work with couples, I had one couple, they stopped kissing for 25 years. 25 years.
Because one of them told the other.
After the husband said to the wife, you kiss too messy, too tonguey, too wet.
We were so
This is common.
Right? Must have been. Two. The emphasis is on the 2-0. And all you have to do is put out the to this, to that, and you will so quickly shut down your partner and your sexual life faster than a speeding bullet. Speak to what you would like. Speak to what will turn you on. Speak to the plus, speak to the positive, not the minus. And you will enhance and embellish and grow your sexual relationship, your sexual esteem, and your sexual intimacy. That's my takeaway.
That's good advice. Play the positive. As in life, right? We always need to focus on the positive.
Absolutely.
So why not in our relationships? We have to really vocalize and focus on what we want, not the opposite.
Because people respond to knowing what they can do rather than what they did wrong. Knowing what you did wrong only leaves you limping away. Knowing what you can do leaves you motivated and inspired.
This is very interesting. Dr. Sarah says, know what you want. Dr. Jane Greer says, tell them what you want.
And know what to do.
And know what to do. What do you
And
say?
I would add, and actually probably something that really became very clear with this TED Talk, I had no idea of the reach Now, these 2.5 million people, this is letters from Mozambique, from Dubai, from Iran, from places where people have no voice, where women cannot voice what they want, where the concept of desire is not part of the marital sexuality. It is a female marital duty. And we want 10 kids, and so we have sexual activity, but nobody's ever asked these women if they like it and if it hurts. So I think we have a whole range here between creating an environment where people can actually feel safe enough to even think that they can want and that someone won't clobber them for even wanting, to then having someone who says, once you feel safe enough, you can begin to know yourself, to then enter into the American environment in which women can be sometimes, not always, bold enough, or men for that matter, everybody, to actually voice their want. And it's a continuum. And that is the work of sexual rights.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much diversity in the world, and I think, being here in the States, we definitely don't, well, some of us actually do. Some of us really do experience not being able to speak out our wants. And I think it's very important that we all advocate for that kind of freedom, because...
sexual desire is a framework that implies sexual rights. Most of the world still works by sexual duty. That's a different story.
True.
Exercise your rights, huh? Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. Hey, I think that's going to be the closing for our panel, so I'd like to give these lovely women a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.